Hello, so till now we saw different type of implementation with respect to CodeIgniter, how we can create a session, a cookie management, including various type of functions like creating your own native library and customizing the library and implementing in your framework. So similar thing could be possible for now that this chapter is focusing about temp data. Temp data, it's like a abbreviated form you can say for temporary data. So it happens that whenever a user wants to remove data stored in the session after some specific time period. See, a session can have n number of data stored in it. It's up to you how to manage those data. Like, are they seriously needed in your session or not? So that kind of implementation is quite important when it comes to CodeIgniter. CodeIgniter does this very easily in a very better way. So that is namely called as a temp data in this framework. So CodeIgniter implements temp data for this purpose. Like you can remove the temporary data, you can use it for some specific stipulated time period, and once it is done, you can remove it from your framework. So to add temp data, what is basically needed is that we need to have a use of this function, mark as temp data. This function is actually used to mark a particular variable or any instance or data as a temporary data. We can retrieve the temp data using temp data function. So this is what is usually done in CodeIgniter when it comes to handling various different type of temporary data in it. So let's focus, let's go to our code base and create a temporary data. For that, first thing important is to create a logic, the business logic in your controller part, and the view part will include the temporary data management, like how the temporary data is created and how it is removed automatically. We will focus in creating a very simple example like creating a value and the temporary data, and clicking on that we will get the value of the temporary data for the session. So let's move to our code base, and in that code base I'll show you how we have created the controller and view with the basically important perspective. Now we'll start with creating our own temp data controller. So here in our code base, I'll go to new file under controllers folder. So here I'll create a file with the name as temp data underscore controller, but I have already in my system. So let's create a new file with the name as temp data one, or I can say new controller dot php. So I create this file. So once it is created, I get a blank file. Now in this file, I'm going to uniquely identify the controller. So I'll say it as in the PHP codes, I'll name the file as class. I'll mention the class name with the class as temp data. So it's a new controller. So I'll create underscore new underscore controller. The name of the file and the class name should match. So accordingly, I will do it. So I'll say it extends CI underscore controller. CI underscore controller. So inside this, I'm going to write the complete logic for it. So here I'll call for the first function. So first function is nothing but our default function, that is the index function. So let's create the index function over here with the access modifier public function index. And inside index, I'm going to call for a session library. So inside this, I'll call for a session library. So my first step will be to call or load a session library inside index function. So that is done under $this load session, and the library name is given, that is session. So I'm loading a library over here. So I'm loading my session library. After that, I will say $this load and view. So I'm going to call for a view, and the name of the view is temp data underscore view. So I will call for this view name over here, that is temp data underscore view. So I've done this logic of declaring my loading of a session module as well as view. So this part is done for index. After index function, that is the default function, I will create another function which is the add function. So here I'll say public function add. Inside add, I'll call for again a library. So I'll call the same library functionality. See, wherever you call for the library functionality, you have to load it. So I will say $this load session, and the session library is called over here. And after that, I'll call for a helper functionality, that is the URL. So I'll say $this load, and I'll call for helper. So that is helper. And inside helper, I'll specify the parameter as URL. So let's specify my parameter over here, that is URL. And inside the URL, I'll call for the temp data. So temp data functionality is done with set underscore temp data, as we have seen earlier in this chapter. So we'll implement the same functionality over here, that is temp data will be removed after 5 seconds. So I'm maintaining a timestamp of 5 seconds with a name and value, that is key value pair is already specified over there. So I will say $this session, and I'll call for function set underscore temp data, and temp data will call for a key value pair. So my value over here is item, the key over here is item, and the value is item value. So I'm specifying it in this way, and the value will be 5 because I am going to terminate my temporary data after 5 seconds. So I'll say 5, and after that I'll redirect my temp data. So I'll say redirect temp data. So I've done with this part. So my logic for the controller is completely done with the index functionality and add functionality. So two functions have been added over here in the controller. So this was the first phase of adding up the functions inside the controller. After that, we have to create a view, as the view name is temp data underscore view. So let's go to our views folder, and inside views folder, I'm going to create a new file, and the new file name would be temp data underscore view. So my file name is temp data underscore view, the way we created in our controller. So temp data underscore view.php is created. Inside this, I'm going to create a typical doc type. So doc type HTML is specified over here, and I'll call for the HTML tags with the parameters. So my language parameter is I'm adding up over here, that is English. So after that, I'll say the head tag will be included over here. So inside head, I'll call for the meta tag and the title tag, the way we did for every view in our previous examples. So meta char set UTF-8, and inside that I'll call for the title. So my title will be, it is a temp data example, so I'll keep the title to be in the most simplest format. So I'll say the title as CodeIgniter temp data example. So I've done with this title part. My head section is being completed. After the head section, I'll call for the body section. So inside body tags, I'll call for the temp data, which we created right now. I'll call my temp data from the key, not from value. So I say temp data example over here, and then I'll call for the h2 tag. So inside h2, I'll call it will be a PHP tag which will call for that particular session item, because every items is associated inside a session. So I'll say echo, and I'll call for a session item. So session is called using $this session and the value, that is temp data. So this we discussed earlier in this chapter, how a temp data has been called. So inside temp data, I'll specify the key, that item is the one which we needed, and I'll just enclose my PHP braces perfectly. So this is the way we did now. After that, I'll call for an anchor tag. Now comes the picture for anchor tag, where I will call for my add functionality. So I'll call an add functionality as temp data add under anchor tag, and I'll mention click here. So this will uniquely identify my anchor tag. After that, so my view section has been designed. After designing the views and controllers, we automatically move to our route section. So we properly align all the HTML tags inside the view section. So now the main focus is with the routes.php section, where we need to route our URL, that is with respect to the controller as well as the views. So controller and views with the functionality will route over here. So I'll pass the parameter $route, and the parameter is for the temp data controller. So I will say the name is temp data underscore controller, and after that I will call for add functionality. So my add functionality will be, so the name of the file, the controller file should match inside the routes.php, keep it in mind. So I just copy paste this value for the add functionality. So here I say temp data, and here I'll specify temp data add. Okay, so this part has been done. My routes has been completed, my views is created, and I have also created the controller section. And my controller name is temp data underscore new underscore controller, which has been completed successfully. So after that, now comes a scenario like we need to check in our browser that the functionality is working or not. So this is my browser, my code repository is accessing this browser. So here I'm going to call for my temp data. So inside index.php, I just mentioned temp data. So this is the view I get it, the temp data view which we created. Now on clicking up this, I will add my temp data. So clicking on this should get the value. So the value which we got for item was item value. So this is how it is depicted over here. So in this way, temporary data is managed successfully in CodeIgniter, where you can maintain the temporary data in your particular session and access the values the way it is needed. So that is also a plus point in CodeIgniter, that you can maintain some values for the temporary period of time. So this was the main thing. So we had a look about temp data. Now arises a picture for flash data. See, the basic concept between the temp data and flash data with respect to CodeIgniter is in same manner. There is some kind of a difference, and that we will analyze in this chapter. First thing, while building the web application, okay, we need to store some data for only one time, and after that we want to remove data. Such a scenario, okay, of storing a data at one time and then removing the data, such kind of scenarios are possible with the help of flash data. So flash data is a kind of a concept which is used in CodeIgniter. Considering for a typical PHP frameworks, okay, apart from PHP, you consider for core PHP framework, in such scenario, flash data is not used. But CodeIgniter keeps this picture of flash data where it shows only that particular data for a period of time. Consider, for example, like, do you want to display some kind of an error message or an information message in PHP? So in PHP, we have to do it manually for core PHP, but in CodeIgniter, we do it with the help of flash data. Now in CodeIgniter, flash data will be available until next request. So it's like temp data only. For a particular period of time, it will be available. The error message will be displayed. And once that particular request has been passed, or we ask for the next request, the previous request will not be available. It will be deleted automatically. So that is the main thing. So in CodeIgniter, flash data will be only available, okay? Only will be available until the next request. So it is like having a kind of a single threaded process if you keep it in mind. So it's like one process is completed, the next process starts, then you can move to the previous process. So that kind of functionality is there for flash data, okay? And it will be deleted automatically, okay? Once you create a new flash data or move into the some other set of flash data, then it will be automatically deleted. Okay, so let's move on to our code base where we'll create the similar kind of the thing like we did for temp data, a controller and a view, and there we will have how the functionalities are implemented. Okay, for flash data, the different set of method is used. Like in temp data, we had mark as temp data. Here in flash data, it will be mark as flash, and we will call, like for temp data, we call like set underscore temp data. In flash data, we'll say set underscore flash data. So we'll move to our code base where we'll create a controller and a view. So this will give a better picture like what is flash data all about. Now let's move into our code base. Here we'll create first of all a new controller for flash data. So flash data will have the same logic as the temp data. So inside controllers, I'll create a name of the file as flash data underscore controller. So it will be flash data underscore controller. Okay, so this will create it. Now we will create a unique identity for the controller the way we did for the previous examples. The best example was for temp data. So here I'll say PHP. Inside this I'll mention class as flash data underscore controller, and it will extend my CI controller. So I'll say extends CI controller. So first of all, I'll do the same way I did it over here. So it's like flash data. So it is already existing in my system. So it's better that we keep the flash data the same way with the new file name. So I'll say flash data controller.php. So here I'm going to save it as .php extension. So that is also a very important concept. So extends ci underscore controller, that is our main file for creating the controller. Okay. So I have done this declaration of the class name. Now the next thing is declaring a function. So that is public function index, which is the default function. Okay, inside this I'm going to load a session library. So loading up a session library is also a primary task. So I'll say load, and inside that I'm going to say load session library. So this is my first step, and inside that I'm going to load it. So I'll say $this load library, and the library loaded will be session as I'm calling for the flash data. The way similar thing we did for temp data, the same thing we are going to follow over here with the various variable declaration of the key value pair. So I've loaded the session library. After loading up the session library, it is important to load a view. So that's why this section will be for redirection to view. So I'll mention in the comment, so that is redirection to home page. So home page redirection will be done with the help of a view, that is loading up a view. $this load view flash data underscore home. So this is my redirection to the view. So this is mentioned over here. After that, I'm going to add a function. So my function will be for adding up the values. So I'll say public. So it is under public function add. Here I will do the similar concept, like first thing will be loading up my session library. So I'll say load session library, and inside that I'll call for my session library, that is $this load session. So it is a library, so it is under library. I'll call for session. After loading up the session, the next step, which is very important, is to call for a URL. So I'll say a URL parameter will be called with the help of a helper. Helper understanding we'll do in the further chapters. It is an advanced concept in CodeIgniter. So helper. Then next thing is adding up the flash data. The way we did for temp data, set underscore temp data, here it will be set underscore flash data. So we will follow the same functionality as $this with $this session set underscore flash data. So I'll follow the same logic over here. And here I'll call for the key value pair. So here it will be first thing, the name I'm going to give something different. We gave item value in our previous chapter. Now it will be XYZ, and the value will be XYZ flash value. So this is my value, and it will, the next step after declaring the key value pair is redirection to home page. So here I'll mention through a comment that it is redirect to home page. Okay, so this is done. After that I'll say redirect, and the redirect function will call for flash data. So that's all I've done with the controller logic. After that, it is important to create a view. We have already called a view with a flash data underscore home. So we'll call this view. First of all, we'll save this file, a new file under views folder. So views folder is over here, and inside this I'll say flash data underscore home dot php. So this creates my view folder. So inside view, I'll call for it. This view folder should be already like the folder should have your complete file existence in it. So here I'll call for my doc type. So that is doc type HTML, and it will say HTML tag with parameters as head. Inside head, I'm going to say a parameter of meta cassette. So I'll say meta cassette as UTF-8. So this is my cassette I'm going to specify. And inside that, I'll mention the title of my head tag. So title will be like it is a flash data example. So I'll give the same title over here the way we did for temp data. So it will be CodeIgniter flash data example. Okay. So this is done. After creating the head tag, the next section we always do is to create a body tag. So inside body tag, I'll say flash data example. So that is flash data example. So there I'll say h2 tag, and inside h2 tag I'm going to call for the flash data item. So I will do the same thing over here. That is echo $this session flash data. It should be session. You should be specific with that perspective. Session flash data, and the item. We should call for the key value. We called item in our previous example. Now the key value is XYZ. So XYZ should call for the XYZ value. That is XYZ flash value which we declared in the controller section. Now we will do for an anchor tag, that is a href, and I'll call for flash data add functionality. So I'll say flash data add the way we did for temp data add. So add functionality was already included in my controller. So I'll say flash data add. After this, I'll give a value that we are going to click here. So that is click here. So this is for to adding up the flash data, to add flash data. Okay, so this is done. So this was the complete logic for understanding for views part. After declaring views and controller, it is important to declare the routes the way we did for temp data. So here I'll say $route, and the value will be flash data, as we are calling for flash data controller, so it should be flash data. So this gives me the picture of flash data controller, the same we did for temp data controller. And after that I'll say $route. The next function is for adding up, so I'll say flash data add, which will call for flash data underscore controller, and the function in which I'll call will be add. So it is nothing but the add functionality. So that's all we did. So we declared inside the route section, we declared a view and as well as the controller. The next step as usual is to implement my value in the browser, like implementing my code base in the browser section. So this is my browser. So here I'll call for the flash data. So here I'll call for flash data with the routes as flash data. So now I've got the same thing the way we did for temp data. On clicking here, I'm getting a value, XYZ flash value, the value which we declared. So this was the similar functionality the way we did for temp data. The only difference over here is that if you have any sort of error message to be defined over here, so that is easily depicted in this flash data example. So flash data and temp data go synchronously hand in hand, but the major difference is that temp data is used for fetching up the temporary value. On the other hand, flash data is used for showing up the error messages and fetching up the temporary values as well. So this was the major concept for flash data in CodeIgniter web framework, like how it is handled and how it is maintained.